Hello, I'm Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. Today we will go over how to solve section A for paper 3. To illustrate this, I have taken May 2025 variant 2 paper. First, I just want to explain to you what is my approach for this lesson. So, in case you just want to go towards the solution of the first question, you can skip the introduction. I've included timestamps below, so you can just go a little ahead in the video. Firstly, I am a school teacher and private tutor for A-level psychology. I've been tutoring for 9+ years. So if you want to schedule your private classes with me, you can contact me on my WhatsApp number that I've left in the description box and pinned comment, or you can even email me. My email ID is also there. I tutor students globally. So you can contact me from any country. I also help with paper corrections. If you don't want classes, you just want me to assess your papers, give you feedback, we can arrange for that also. Okay, in this video, I'm going to teach you how to answer the questions, what you should look out for, what the marks indicate, how to read the command terms, how to organize your answers. It's going to be a how video. Also, I want to keep it brief, so that is why I'm going to just jot down the answers in bullet points. I'm not going to write down the complete answers, that takes a lot of time. But I know many of you would like to see model answers. You want complete solutions for the paper. Maybe you want to use it as a reference to structure your own answers, or some of you just like to focus more on the what, the content rather than the how. For that, I'm going to upload a PDF copy of all the model answers written perfectly, as you should write them in the exams. And I'm going to put that PDF on my website. I will link it in the description box and pinned comment below. So you could visit my website and download the PDF file from there. The model answers will not be available in this video. This video is more of guidance on how to write the answers. Okay, so having said that, let's begin with solving the questions. Okay, lots of students ask me about how to allocate their time when it comes to solving paper 3. You have to answer for two options. Most of you must have taken clinical psychology, it's the most popular choice. Along with this, you must have taken one more option. Or in any case, even if you've taken two different options altogether, one option is worth 30 marks. So, clinical psychology, for example, is totally worth 30 marks, and you have 45 minutes to answer. As a rule of thumb, or what is recommended is, for the 6 and 10 marker, you can reserve 10 and 20 minutes respectively. Half an hour for those two answers. Remaining 15 minutes which you have in hand, you can give for the 2 or 4 markers, which come before the 6 and 10 markers. Okay, so that is how you can distribute your time ideally. Of course, things can fluctuate a little. That's okay. But just when you're practicing, that can be your target. Also, this is applicable to both options which you select. The time distribution that I've explained, you can use it for clinical psychology as well as the other option that you're doing. Okay, so let's come to the first question. It's a scenario based 4-marker question. I'll just read out the question. Fuzzy has pyromania. He's unable to resist starting fires. Fuzzy sets fires and then watches them burn in order to relieve his anxiety. Suggest how imaginal desensitization could help Fuzzy manage his symptoms of pyromania. How you need to read this question is, first look at the fact that there is a situation. Even without reading it fully, you can see that there's a situation. Meaning it's an AO2 application type of question. Whatever you've learned in the textbook, you need to link that knowledge to this situation to gain marks. Meaning that, and listen to this very carefully, you do not just give general points on what imaginal desensitization is, or you don't just summarize the Blasinski and Norvus study, for example. That is not what this question is asking you to do. They're asking you whatever you've learned about imaginal desensitization, you need to apply that to Fuzzy and answer how his pyromania could be dealt with using that technique. So if you're going to give general points like in imaginal desensitization, there's a script that is prepared, then the client has to do homework, has to practice it in the sessions, and you don't refer to Fuzzy at all. You don't talk about pyromania at all. Or alternatively, because the gambling study was there, Mary Doe study, you talk about it in reference to gambling. you'll get 0 marks. And then don't be surprised, I wrote so much, I wrote about imaginal desensitization and still I got 0 marks. Because the question requires you to talk about fuzzly, not to give general points. Next thing you need to notice, the command term is suggest. Again, linking to the same fact that you need to suggest or you need to apply what you've learned to fuzzly. Suggest about fuzzly. That's what they're trying to tell you. Otherwise, they would have said something like outline, imaginal desensitization, or explain it, describe it. But they have not given any of those AO1 command terms. Nothing descriptive has been asked. Directly, they're telling you suggest about fuzzly, what is happening in his case. So again, indicates, like reaffirms that it is an AO2 question. Next, you need to note this is about imaginal desensitization. When you see that in the question, you start remembering, okay, this was what was imaginal desensitization, this was the principle, this was the procedure. Mentally, you have to think about these things. So be ready to answer from that point of view. Although it might seem obvious to you, I can't tell you how many students are there who start giving very general points. They don't bring about in their mind what are the specific steps in the procedure of imaginal desensitization per se. Rather, what they do is general CBT that they know about. People have to come to sessions, like clients have to come to sessions, they have to do some homework, they might have to maintain a diary. They start giving that in relation to the situation. Bring to your mind the specific terminology which is applicable to imaginal desensitization. Think about scripts, think about visualization, think about progressive muscle relaxation. You have to prepare your answer around these points. So when you see a word like imaginal desensitization, understand this is the core concept that is being assessed here, and every point that I must give must be relevant to this particular technique. Next, take note of the fact that pyromania is the impulse control disorder which is specified. So no doubt you have to link it to fuzzly, keeping in mind that this is about pyromania. Although we have learned a case study which is different from this, it was about gambling disorder. Whatever points I give must not be about gambling disorder. They must be specific to pyromania. So again, in the same way, bring to your mind what are the specifics that you've learned about pyromania. People who have pyromania, they like to set fires, which is mentioned here also. They like to see the burning of fire, and they make use of lot of fire related equipment. They are very fascinated by that equipment, like lighters, kerosene, matchboxes. So that knowledge also will help you to give some points, because after all, if you see about fuzzly, I think they've just given 2 sentences or 2 points, which is very less. So you will also have to draw on your knowledge about pyromania and imaginal desensitization while answering. So when you see the keywords in a question, like in this case 2 keywords, need to bring back all those things to your mind and be prepared before writing the answer that okay, this is what was covered in these topics. Next, you look at the marks. This question is for 4 marks, so you need to give 4 points. I also get a lot of questions about how many words we should answer and what should be the word count or how many sentences we should write. I mentioned earlier that I'm going to upload the answers on my website. So I will also upload a copy of the answers with all those suggestions, all those comments on how many words you should write. Of course, there's no hard and fast rule, there's no official rule from Cambridge. But generally, what examiners are looking for, what word count is required, those sort of suggestions also I will put up in a document as comments, and then you can download it from my website. So if you want, besides in this video, whatever suggestions and advice that I'm giving you, you want more and you want it in a document form that you can keep with you for reference, do visit my website. Okay, as of now, I can tell you that you need to give 4 points. By 4 points, I mean 4 unique points. What some students do is they will write in a form, Fazli has pyromania. Pyromania means that he likes to watch objects burn. That is what is mentioned in the situation, that he is unable to resist starting fires. This means that Fazli likes to watch fires burn. From the answer, can you make out the same thing is being repeated again and again in every sentence? Then they'll count, okay, 4 marks, I've written 4 sentences. Then later they will wonder, why didn't I get 4 marks? I wrote 4 sentences. 4 marks means 4 unique or 4 different points have to be given. Not that the same point you keep repeating in the same or different words. That even if it's 4 sentences or 40 sentences in which you're making the point again and again, it is worth credit of at the most 1 mark if you've written it correctly. Okay, so don't take 4 points to mean the same point repeated over and over. That cannot be your approach. Okay, as I told you earlier, now considering all these things about the question, I will just make some pointers which will give you a hint of how you can write your answer. So you can develop your answer based on these points that I'm writing. Definitely, your first point should be about personalized script. There will be some script prepared for Fazli considering he has pyromania, so you can talk about that. You could give some examples of what would be written on the script. So 1 mark for specifying that a script will be there, another mark for giving a different point, which is exactly what will be written. In quotations, you can give examples of what narration would be prepared of the script for Fazli in particular, considering that he has pyromania. Again, I won't repeat this again and again, but just because this is the beginning of the video, I want to remind you, if you need a full answer for this in front of you with the examples and everything, like whatever points I'm giving you fully developed, you want an answer, you can visit my website for that. Okay, then you could mention how he will be taught progressive muscle relaxation. So when he's imagining the script, the narration, that time he has to practice this. How he will have to do the practice of the script in sessions and for homework. You could also include points about, so as such, these are 4 points that I've given, but if you want to include more, because after all, it's a lengthy procedure, there are other possible points also. You could also talk about doing something alternative to combat maybe the boredom which he's having, and that is why he's setting fires, or he has a lack of ambition, and that is why he's just setting fires, because that makes him feel invested in something. So what he could do other than that? Like you must have seen in Mary Doe's case, she would go for gambling because she used to feel lonely. Her problem was that of loneliness rather than boredom. So the researchers made her imagine that alternatively she was going to the cinema house instead of the gambling center. So even you could give some suggestion like this for Fazli. Just make sure to give an explicit suggestion of what he could do alternatively. Not mentioned here, but you know that pyromania is generally then youngsters, especially teenagers. So what a teenager could do instead of setting fires, you could think about that. Okay, so this is how you need to structure your answer. I've written 5 unique points as such. You could take any 4 and develop your answer on that. Next is a very simple question. Outline systematic desensitization as treatment of phobia. Outline is an AO1 command term, which means you have to give description. Anyways, you can't see any situation to which you apply your knowledge. So what you've learned from the textbook, either if you've memorized in textbook terms only, you could write it, or in your own words, but make sure to use good terminology. Okay, and very important here is to make note of the marks. Many students give a 1-line definition and they say, okay, we've outlined what is systematic desensitization. You have, but for 1 line that you give, like say 1-line definition, you cannot justify 2 marks. So definitely your first point should be definition. There's no argument to that. But after that definition, there needs to be some example or some elaboration to justify a 2nd mark. Okay, so I'll give you some possibilities. Firstly, when it comes to definition, what I mean by good terminology is either mention reciprocal inhibition, that imaginal desensitization is a treatment based on reciprocal inhibition, that relaxation and anxiety tend to cancel out each other and they can't exist at the same time. So that way you could define it. Or you could define it in terms of hierarchy and ratings, gradual exposure. So systematic desensitization is that treatment in which a hierarchy is made, and in order the situations that trigger or phobia set on that hierarchy, and then there is gradual exposure, and as the person is getting exposed they have to keep rating whether their fear is reducing or not. You can bring to mind the Chapman and Delap study or the button phobia study that you done last year. If you're not able to remember anything at all, and the concepts which you'd learned there, you could just explain some of those to show what is this technique. This will count for 1 mark either way. Either you're writing reciprocal inhibition or hierarchy, in whichever way you're defining it. Additionally, you need to give one example or some elaboration on it, some additional point on it. You can give these two also as separate points, one on the principal reciprocal inhibition and one on how it works, hierarchy and ratings. Okay, for if you choose the example route, you could give an example of Saavedra and Silverman or Chapman and Delap, an actual study which you've seen. In that, this technique was used to resolve either button phobia of the boy or blood injection injury phobia in case of T. Or you could give a general example also, like if someone has, say, arachnophobia, phobia of spiders, then a hierarchy would be built from ranging from exposure to small to large spiders, and the client will be taught how to relax in response to them. So that would be a separate point. Or you could just give an elaboration. For elaboration, you could contrast it with flooding. Like there are too many possibilities. What we call implosion therapy or flooding, which requires direct exposure to the most frightening situation. Compared to that, this is gradual. That could be one point. Or you could say this is a type of CBT because it involves changing cognitions and behaviors of people. You could also say this is more of a behavioral therapy because it works on outside exposure and not so much on changing thoughts. So either you can classify CBT or behavioral therapy. Or you could give the name of Volpe, who has developed this technique, and what was his ideology behind developing it, how he took inspiration from counter conditioning to develop this. Anything does. Just make sure that because it is 2 marks, you do justify those 2 marks by giving a second detail also. When I said good terminology, what I meant by that was you use terms like reciprocal inhibition, hierarchy, gradual exposure. These type of terms is what gets you marks. Some students tend to use very casual language. Instead of hierarchy, they would say a list of situations should be made. Instead of gradual exposure, they would say that the client should be shown the situations. It can be that when it comes to 2 or 4 marks, they might still give you full credit even if you're using casual language, though depends how casual it is. But when it comes to the 6 and 10 marker questions, if you're going to use casual informal language and you're not going to use terms like these, you're definitely losing marks because it's directly there on the rubric that terminology should be good. So put a habit of it, especially when you're practicing. This is not your final paper, this is your practice paper. Even for the smaller questions, even for 2 and 4 marks, use good terminology, then only it becomes a habit. If you're not going to use it, some places you will answer informally. Inevitably, in the long answers, also you will answer informally because that will become your habit. So don't develop bad habits. Okay, and this is something that you need to apply everywhere. I'm sorry, I've put the answer in the wrong place. This is something you need to apply everywhere, terminology in all sorts of questions. Even the application type you must have seen. I've used good terminology like script and all. Even in the evaluation questions, you will see that. Let's come to the next question. It's part B, so it's definitely going to be related to what we've just written. Explain one reason why systematic desensitization supports the situational side of the debate about individual and situational explanations. This is why it's very important to consider all relevant issues and debates for every topic, because otherwise you lose 2 and 4 marks. Many students feel that, for my 10 marker, these are the points that I'm going to take. So I should not learn about any other issues or debates. Definitely, it's very advisable for your 10 markers. You make your essay plans, you finalize for which topic, which issues and debates you'd like to write. It's a very good strategy. But to ignore all other issues and debates in that topic could mean that you're not able to answer these type of questions. So in the syllabus, whichever issues and debates are mentioned for whichever topics, make sure that you can talk about all of them at least briefly. Because here you can see, do you have an option to leave this question? No, you have to only answer it. So then if you don't have any idea about situational side, when it comes to systematic desensitization, you're losing your 2 marks. Alternatively, you can learn your issues and debates so well that on the spot you're able to apply them to any topic, you're able to reason. But I've seen students are not very good in that. That's why I'm saying that if you're not able to on the spot evaluate a study in terms of some debate, make sure that you keep your points prepared. You don't need to write full answers. I know you don't have time for that. But at least having your bullet points jotted down for, okay, this topic, this issue, I could talk about this. Just in 2-3 words, you can note in a point. This topic, this issue, I could talk about this. Have some preparation or at minimum some practice of these type of questions to develop your skill to be able to on the spot apply any issue to any topic. If you don't practice at all, or like I said, you just memorize, okay, these issues for this topic, it can help you with the 10 marker if the named issue also gets covered with that, but here definitely you're going to have difficulties. Okay, now how to read this type of question is one reason, very important. What they've said, one reason. Students inevitably, they give two. I'm telling you, as obvious as it might seem, they read one, still they give two. Why? Either they're in a haste and they did not read one, like they read it but it didn't register to them that they have to give one. Or they feel that 2 marks are there, let me give two. You know, even if you give two, they have said give one, means you're not going to credit the second one. No matter how well you write the second one, the examiner is not going to consider that. It's sheer waste of time. So make sure you give only one reason. Secondly, explain is the command term. It's purely AO1. What you've learned in the textbook, you need to directly describe that for the answer. You can see there's no situation to apply and there is no evaluation as such. They're just asking you, why would we say it is situational? They're not asking you to evaluate whether that situational is a strength or weakness. Next, you need to note that they're asking you only for the situational side. Again, one more bad habit, give both situational and individual, even if only situation is asked for. You're not getting any credit for saying why it is individual. Whatever is not asked in the question as a matter of policy, if you're going to write anything of that sort which has not been asked for, you're getting zero credit. You're just wasting your time, which you need to answer for the questions. Psychology is a lengthy paper, so don't waste your time. Okay, so those are the things you need to note. Of course, the marks, that's the last consideration. 2 marks, so you need to give 2 unique points. Typically, there's a very proper structure that you can follow for this type of answer, like it's very standardized. First, you just specify the reason. You know, in fact, you can have a template also when you're writing these type of answers. Systematic desensitization supports situation expression because dash. Just fill in that. That's one point. That is like specifying the reason. Next is to elaborate a little further on that reason or to explain that reason. Like you've just mentioned or specified the reason, the first point. So now to explain it further, that will be your second point. So like I told you, first you have a template because dash. The next one could be this means that dash. What does it mean? You just explain. There are many possibilities again for an answer of this type. When the mark scheme comes out, we'll be able to see more possibilities. You can brainstorm. As of now, if I brainstorm, what all I can think about is, firstly, the fact that people are exposed to situations on the hierarchy, right? Situations that can trigger their phobia. That itself supports the situational side. Are they being asked to work on themselves, like their own anxious thoughts, or is there some attempt to, modify the neurochemicals like GABA in their brain by giving them anti-anxiety medication? No, nothing of that sort is being done. Nothing is being targeted in them individually or within their bodies or within their mind. They are being asked to deal with situations on the outside through the hierarchy. That itself supports the situational side. Besides that, if you see, this treatment is very contingent on the expertise of the therapist. The client has to prepare a hierarchy in conjunction with the therapist. So though the therapist does not prepare the hierarchy by themselves and force it on the client that you have to practice this, but they guide the client totally on how to prepare the hierarchy, how to give the ratings, then how to practice it. The therapist might decide whether they should be in vivo or in vitro exposure depending on how prepared the client is. So a lot depends on the expertise of the therapist when it comes to success of the treatment, whether it will work out or not. So that also becomes a situational factor. As of now, these points are coming to my mind. Also, like I mentioned, in vivo, in vitro exposure. When it comes to in vivo exposure, which is directly into a situation, like making the client confront the situation, that particularly becomes situational because they have to actually be there in the situation and practice relaxation so that they don't feel fear anymore. So you could give that also. So these are some reasons why it could be considered to be situational. Like I told you, when the mark scheme comes out, or perhaps right now also in your mind some other reasons are coming, any reason is good as long as it's logical, does not have to be one of these are just suggestions. As long as you explain it correctly, you will get 2 marks. One thing I mentioned earlier, that you don't give the individual side when they ask you situational side, but if you give it in terms of it is situational because of this, and why it is not individual, because like I had given you the example, we are not working on the client's own thoughts or their own brain chemistry. That counts because there you're saying why it's not individual. Indirectly you're explaining why it is situational. That's fine. Don't explain why it is individual. That will not count. Okay, then we have a next question altogether. When Lena was a child outside with her mother, she saw a snake. She then developed a phobia of snakes. Suggests a psychodynamic explanation for why Lena has a phobia for snakes. The first 4 marker which we had seen, whatever I told you there applies here. So if you've forgotten how to approach AO2 question, you can just rewind a little and you can see. Here we have to bring to mind psychodynamic explanation, Freud's explanation. So what would come to your mind? Freud's explanation, phobia. Which terms are coming to your mind? I hope phallic stage, Oedipus Electra complex, castration anxiety, dream analysis, uh, identification, displacement, id, ego, superego, mostly the id in this case. So I hope these terms are already coming to your mind when you see psychodynamic and phobia. Specifically, you have to relate with phobia of snakes in this case. So again, I'll give you a number of points which you could use to develop your answer. See, Lena is most likely to be in the phallic stage because according to Freud, that is when phobias develop. So you could specify the age range, which is for the phallic stage. That could be one of your points. Again, don't write generically. When the child is in the phallic stage, then they develop phobia. Why are you not talking about Lena? When they've given you a scenario about Lena, why don't you take her name and say Lena is going to be in the phallic stage? Why do you like beat around the bush and talk about generally what's happening? That won't get you marks. So if you're talking about phallic stage, say Lena must be in the phallic stage. Next, your point could be about Electra complex. Of course, I'm just noting the points here. If you're writing about it, you need to relate it with her situation. What must be happening exactly? You need to define that. She must be attracted to her father and jealous of her mother. Do not use the term Oedipus complex. She's a girl. Girls undergo Electra complex. It's boys who undergo Oedipus complex. So the parallel process which is in girls, you need to mention that. Okay, then what must be happening in her case? She's jealous of her mother, insecure, maybe she has some fear like penis envy, and that is why she's feeling scared of her mother, or she has fear of losing the love of her mother. Again, you can't give the little hands type of explanation. He had Oedipus complex, castration anxiety. You can't directly apply it here because this is a girl, this is not a boy, so you can't say that she has castration anxiety. But in girls, why there might be this fear, you can explain that. So either you can explain loss of love, or fear of, like I said, penis envy. So these might be creating negative emotions in her, and then she's displacing on all these negative emotions onto the snake, of which she's feeling phobic. So actually she's not scared of the snake, she has other sorts of phobias which she's projecting onto the snake, what is called displacement. Now, I know when it comes to psychodynamic explanation, there's a lot of confusion in students because textbooks have covered it very differently. I believe the three official textbooks which are there all have covered them differently. So one of them has the Oedipus complex, Little Hands and all. The other textbooks just have very general id, ego, super ego type of, uh, you know, definitions which are used to explain phobia. Special terminology is not given at all, like Oedipus complex and all. First, my view on this is learn from a good textbook. I don't mean the other textbooks are bad, but learn from one which is more detailed and more specialist. I recommend the Hodder textbook that has these details, these terms which I have used here. So definitely you can use that. Alternatively, if you're referring to some other textbook, then you have to do your own research. You have to look up on the internet or in other source books and come up with these terms. These two strategies are preferable, first preference. In case you are just learning from your textbook, your teacher is insisting on some other textbook and you have to write from that, then even if you're not able to give these specialist terms, actually these are the most important when it comes to phobia, then at least use good terminology, the general concepts given by Freud, id, ego, superego, use them correctly in this situation. What I have noticed is when students are learning from one particular book where the specialist terminology is given, the answers tend to be better. They include more terms. When they are giving from those textbooks where specific terminology isn't given, then they are writing very casual. They are not understanding fully how to talk about it and all, and they are writing anyhow. That won't justify 4 marks. That's why I said preferably learn from a good textbook. Otherwise, if you have to put in general terms, you could talk about the id. It creates a lot of impulsiveness in childhood. So use terms like id, impulsiveness. Then what can happen because of that is this energy needs to be regulated by the ego. And in Lina's case, what this would mean is maybe a lot of negative energy is being generated by her id, pushing her to experience very negative emotions like anger, frustration, upset. And then it is the ego which is trying to channelize this energy by using a defense mechanism. I think inevitably you will have to link it to displacement, no matter which source book you're using. Because why she's scared of snakes, there's no direct encounter with snakes that is specified, definitely because of displacement. So, in the process of trying to regulate her id, the ego is making her afraid of snakes, displacing her general negative feelings onto the snakes because conscious acceptance of these negative feelings can overwhelm her. It could be very difficult for her to accept, and it could result in mental disorders. So the ego is trying to protect her from that by releasing on the phobia to an external stimulus. Ultimately, though, because defense mechanisms work on a very temporary basis, they are not healthy coping mechanisms, it is resulting in her developing full fledged phobia, which is a mental disorder. So, like I mentioned, either you give it with specific terms related to the phallic stage and phobia, electra, Oedipus complex, whatever it is, or if you're giving generally, like I have explained with good terminology, 4 unique points, you explain it that way. Only then you will get good marks. Next is explain one weakness of psychodynamic explanation for Lena's phobia of snakes. This is a good answer, in fact, because they've not specified any particular issue or debate that you need to give. One weakness means you're free to take whichever you want. How to answer this type of question? Like I've explained for 2B. You can revisit that. Same approach you have to take for the marks and the command term and all. Let's brainstorm which weaknesses we could give. See, one and the most obvious one is that I think most of you would be thinking about it. Psychodynamic explanation has no empirical basis. The evidence which is there to support it is very weak. Like case studies are there, and they are not meritorious. They don't have good control or reliability or anything. So we can't take it as a valid explanation of Lena's phobia. We have to link to Lena because they've mentioned explain for her phobia. So if you're just going to say Freud just used to do case studies, so there is no proper empirical evidence for his theories, you won't get marks. They're asking you why is it a problem for Lena's phobia. So if you're mentioning that point, specify that it might not be a valid account for her behavior. Link it to her behavior. Another point that could be coming to your mind is generalizability is lacking. Because again, Freud did very selective studies, like he did a case study of little Hans for phobia, and then he tried to generalize to everybody from there. But every case is unique. Maybe what was applicable to Hans might not apply in Lena's phobia. Hans had a phobia of horses. His circumstances were very unique. He was a boy. He had Oedipus, not Electra complex. So to generalize from his study to a different case like this one might not be fully applicable. Or you could even pick up any of the issues or debates, especially in the paper. If you just run out of points, you don't know what to write about, you could just start thinking of the various debates that could apply. So one that could apply is reductionism. You could just say that there are alternative explanations for phobia which have not been considered by Freud. For example, there's classical conditioning, and that could be the reason for Lena's phobia. For example, the snake stimulus might be a conditioned stimulus that is linked to something else, a natural stimulus which is more frightening for her. And that is why it's a conditioned response to be scared of the snakes. If you're giving reductionism, make sure you give an example of an alternative explanation in Lena's context. If you're just going to say it's reductionist and leave it at that, you get 1 mark at the most. To get full 2 marks, your points always have to be complete, no matter which answer it is. You could also talk about psychic determinism or determinism. It is a deterministic explanation. It assumes that people have no control over their phobias. In Lena's case, the assumption is that she's bound to be phobic of snakes because she might have experienced some childhood conflicts, like we have outlined in the previous answer. Whereas in reality, individuals might have some regulation, some free will on how they choose to think about various stimuli, and therefore they may or may not develop phobia depending on their own thought processes, their own willpower, which is ignored by this explanation. Also, when it comes to reductionism, one more point is coming to my mind. I think most of the textbooks you must have read about this. When it comes to stimuli like snakes, we have evolutionary phobia of them. We are predisposed to being fearful of such stimuli because even though we have not encountered snakes, like we live in cities, most of us never seen snakes, still we have biological preparedness to be scared of them. I'm sure you have come across this in some evaluation in your textbook. So you could give that as an alternative explanation, that psychodynamic explanation might not be correct for Lena's case because the fear might just be out of biological preparedness or evolution. It might have nothing to do with childhood conflicts in her case. Then we have the 6 and 10 marker. Okay, again, if you want to know about what word count you should aim for, how many sentences, how to structure, you want to see a 6 marker in front of you because there's so much to write from in the textbook. You don't know exactly what to bring it down to. Model answers are there on the link that I have put in the description box and pin comment. Here also I'll tell you what are the main concepts you can cover. If you look at the 6 marker rubric, right now I'm not putting that rubric here, it becomes lengthy. You get answers, good marks in 6 markers. If you use good terminology, that is one. You have to use good psychological terms to answer, which I've already explained for smaller answers. That same thing you have to apply here. Second, you have to show understanding. And understanding does not mean just specifying facts. Defining the terms that you're using, giving examples where necessary, elaborating to show that you understand the concept means it's not just that you've memorized the words, but you know what it means. That is what needs to come across in your answer. So if you write with that point of view, you will get marks. As we jot down the points, I will explain this to you more. First thing is the command term is describe. For the 6 marker, it's always going to be describe, and the 10 marker is always going to be on the same topic for which the 6 marker is there. Two topics are given for 6 marks. Earlier, this used to come for 8 marks in the previous syllabus. I hope you're not referring to those questions papers. Please don't. So the 6 markers, 3 marks for each. They can't give you more than 2 topics together because it will become too much for 6 marks. So think of it as Beck's depression theory, you need to justify for 3, and learned helplessness, you need to justify for 3. Now, considering that these are the marks distribution, you need to write your answer, meaning that give equal weightage to both. Some students, either they've learned one of these better, so they write a lot about them, or when they start, they have a lot of time, so elaborately they write on Beck's theory, then they're running out of time, they go into stress, they write hardly anything about learned helplessness. Or because that studies then learned helplessness Seligman, they write a lot about that and they write hardly anything about Beck's theory. All these approaches are wrong. When they have kept equal marks for both the topics asked, you cannot give more importance to one over the other. You will have to condense and summarize an explanation like learned helplessness, which is very long because of the study, to equal length as the previous one. See, the fact is they don't give you marks for length. They don't give you marks for word count. They don't even give you marks for using some formula like, oh, 3 marks are there, I'll give 3 sentences. You don't get marks for any of these. You get marks as per the rubric. Terminology, knowledge, understanding. You get marks for this. But what I'm telling you is very practical. If two concepts are being given equal marks, how will it justify that you write a lot about one and hardly anything about the other? Won't you compromise on terminology or showing your understanding if you're really reducing the length of one? So automatically then you are not meeting the rubric requirements. That is why practically try to be fair when it comes to both the topics, write equally about both. For Beck's cognitive theory of depression, what are the key terms you need to explain? I won't explain them right now, the video will become very long. So I'm just listing them. But when you're writing, you have to define each of them, you have to give examples for them. Negative cognitive triad, very important, most important. You must talk about it. Self, future, and the world. All of this you have to explain. Cognitive distortions, black and white thinking, all or nothing, overgeneralization, jumping to inferences. You can't write all of it for 3 marks, but you can definitely give 1 or 2 concrete examples. Negative self schema. Okay, each of these concepts, define them, use these terms while writing, don't make up your own terms. Instead of negative self schema, they think negatively about themselves. Just for writing that and not mentioning the word schema, you're definitely losing marks. So definition, example, and use of good terminology for all of this. This will come under Beck's. Also not compulsory, but I would strongly recommend reasoning. Why does all of this happen according to Beck? Because after all, you're explaining depression. So according to Beck, why is someone having a negative cognitive triad, or why do they show distortions about how their childhood goes in one sentence? You can just explain that. Many students ask me, should we write an outline before answering the question? Yes, you can do that in the paper. Just with your pencil or pen, you could just write outline, jot down, and then you can start writing the full answer. That's good. But nothing can override practice. You need to practice these type of answers. It should not be during the paper first time you're thinking about how to write a 6 marker. That strategy is bound to fail. If you practice a lot, you can't practice all the 6 and 10 markers which are there, that's huge. But at least if you practice, I don't know, 20, 25, 30, 6 markers in the whole course, I'm giving you a minimum. 20, 25, 10 markers in the whole course. Then you will find, you don't need to depend so much on making outlines and all. It comes to you automatically mentally. Because you're not practiced enough, you worry about these things. Either case, if your preference is you just like to make your outline first and then write, you can do that. It hardly takes a few seconds. For learned helplessness, mention the name of Seligman, they haven't. So just mention who has given the theory, what is the core principle, what did he mean by learned helplessness, define that. Uh, then, very, very important, most important for this one is to talk about pessimistic attribution style. That is at the core of depression. That is why depression develops, according to Seligman. So you must explain what it is, including all its facets, internal, stable, and global attribution. You have to explain all of that. And then, of course, you have to summarize his 1988 study. If you've learned some other study by any chance, because this is just an example one, you might have learned some other. You can give that one, but I think most of you would learn this one because this is then the textbooks. For just 3 marks, you can't give at length what you've learned about the study, but at least what was his objective of doing the study, the aim, what was the procedure in maybe one or two sentences, what did he make the participants do basically, and what was the results and conclusion. What did he find? What did he understand from that? Did it support his theory or not? How did he manage to link attribution style with depression in that study? You can just explain all of that briefly. I know it seems challenging how to reduce so much to so little. Practice is the only answer. You have to practice. It won't happen at the time of exam. If you keep practicing, it will come automatically during the exam. And of course, initially, if you need to see a few answers, you need a little guidance, the model answers in front of you. Definitely, you can download those. Okay, now coming to evaluation. Again, see, when it comes to the 10 marker, there is nothing like, word length will be given marks, word count or length of the answer will be given marks. No. What you get marks is for according to the rubric. So when it comes to the 10 marker, you have to give context and reasoning. Context and analysis, I think they call it. Those are the main things to score highly. What you can assume, again, this is very rough guide that I'm giving you. It's not this way, it's not fixed, but it helps to think in this way, if to prepare your answers. The issue that is named determinism versus free will, it's for 4 marks. Just think of it that way. And you need to take 2 additional issues, 3 marks each. So that's how it totally comes to 10 marks. Think of it that way. You might have some other preference. You might like to give 4 points instead of 3. You can do that. Just make sure that every point has context and analysis. Just for listing out as many points as possible without going into the depth of them, you're not getting marks. For example, I can give 9 or 10 evaluation points for these two topics. But if I just give one sentence on each, like I just mentioned them, I don't elaborate on them in any way, I'm definitely not getting marks. Like I'll feel I've written 9 or 10 points and I'm getting only 2 or 3 marks. So that strategy doesn't help. That's why we recommend totally 3 evaluation points, including the named issue, because then you're able to go in enough depth to justify the requirements of the rubric. So take it that way. Okay, other things, I can't go over everything right now. You can see some of my previous videos where I've explained more at length. Don't give introductions and conclusions. You don't get any credit for them. Time is very precious in the psychology paper. Don't waste it on writing things which don't get credit. So don't give introduction, conclusion, don't give descriptive points. You've already covered those in AO1 part, the 6 marker. Evaluate means only strengths and weaknesses, no AO1. This is a purely AO3 command term. Okay, also which issues and debates to take besides the named one, you're free to take any, whichsoever you want. There are 10 issues and debates in A levels. Take any, whichever you like. Ideally, the ones which are mentioned in the syllabus for a given topic, those are the most relevant ones. So yes, but in case you are less prepared at the time of the paper and you don't remember which are the most relevant ones, you're free to take any, as long as you can give it in correct detail. If you want to learn about the Peel format of writing, if you want to learn how to give context and reasoning, I have covered those things in previous videos. Today I won't be able to do that much. Today I'm just going to give you from a brainstorming point of view what all points are possible, and just a little bit I'll touch upon how you can elaborate on them. Again, a full model answer like tailored to 10 marks is there. on my website. But besides what I have given in that model answer, what other possible evaluation points are there which you could also cover? I'll just run through all of those right now. When it comes to determinism versus free will, many students don't explain it well. They have a mindset biological explanations are the difficult ones, psychological are the easy ones. So I can use any casual language in writing the psychological ones. It's very common sense, so I will just write whatever comes to my mind. That's why they score very badly on the paper. If you see overall for psychology, the marks required to get A grade and was very less because the student's attitude many times tends to be apathetic towards the paper. It doesn't matter whether they're asking you biological or psychological explanation. You have to elaborate well, justify well, not in loose language, not in a commonsensical way. Actually, what is there in the theory? What terminology has been used? What has been explained about the psyche? According to that, you have to justify. That's why many students believe that both these explanations support the free will side. Why? Because they think of the therapies. CBT is there corresponding to these theories. So they believe just because CBT is based on free will, the client has to collaborate and improve on their depression. So even the explanations are based in free will. But is explanation and treatment the same thing? Are they asking you about CBT treatment in this question? No. So prepare well for all types of questions. Don't have casual attitude towards any topic. All topics require serious preparation. Both these explanations are deterministic because Beck has directly proposed that negative childhood experiences result in cognitive distortions, and Seligman has proposed that inescapable situations faced in childhood result in depression. Any of these, bad treatment from parents in childhood or being put in inescapable situations, is it in the control of the individual? Do they choose that they want to be in bad situations? Do they choose that they want parents to abuse them? Then how can it be free will? Okay, so think from that point of view. So both are deterministic. When you're writing, you justify the reasons why both are deterministic. Then, as a counterpoint, or however, you can say they support therapies which are based on free will. So, to that extent, that they believe depression comes because of fixed factors, but even if people have depression, they can work upon it using their willpower. To that extent, it supports free will. That is how you need to explain it, and then you can link it to CBT and give an example from there. The next point you could take, now there are a number of them. I'm just taking the ones in the syllabus. I'm running through all of them. You can finalize besides this one. This is your compulsory one. Besides this one, which other ones you want to take, that is up to you. So out of now, whichever I'm going to write, you can select any two. You could take nature versus nurture. Both the therapies are nurture based because both talk about learning from situations. Like if we take learned helplessness, it is learning from inescapable situations, that because one cannot escape them, one is helpless. And that's why when an individual grows up also and they are faced with challenging situations, they automatically presume that those are inescapable. Were they born with that tendency to think that they can't escape situations? No. They learned it from bad experiences which they had. Similar reasoning you can give for Beck. That is why both support nurture. For a counterpoint, you can say that, however, there might be some nature element also, in the sense that there have been countless examples of people who have been in helpless situations. Abuse is common, confining people, trapping people, especially when they're children, is common. It's not unheard of. But not everyone learns to be helpless. So maybe there's an element of biology or preparedness to become helpless. Some predisposition is there, probably some genetic factor which makes one vulnerable. That is there, which is not accounted for in the explanation. You can give it in a strengths weakness format also. So you could say that both support nurture, which is a strength because it shows the effect of learning on on depression, and which was a radically different approach from which was existing, like the serotonin hypothesis, biological ones. They were all supporting nature. So these were new therapies that came in that showed the other side also nurture. So that is to their merit, that is their strength. But in terms of weakness, the fact that there are possible biological explanations, like maybe inherited genes, like I gave the example, which are being totally ignored, that's a weakness. To that extent, nature should be considered, which is not being done. So if you prefer the strength weakness format, you can talk about it in that way also. Or when it comes to issues and debates, you can just say this side is supported in that way, that side is or is not supported in that way. You could just write it that way, like it's just a discussion. Okay, then when it comes to the next one, reductionism versus holism, I think this tends to be the simplest. Again, that's why students have a casual attitude to it. You assume that, oh, reductionism is something which I can give everywhere, so I'll get marks. Just for saying something is a reductionist, you don't get marks. So it's not easy to get marks in that sense. It's an issue, you can think of it as easy to elaborate upon, provided you give some strong concrete reasoning as to why the explanations are reductionist. There are many possibilities when it comes to reductionism, because you could give any other alternative explanation. If combined, it would make the explanation more holistic. Firstly, why are these explanations reductionist? Both are because depression is a full psychophysiological disorder. These are oriented towards explaining only the cognitive and behavioral symptoms. They don't really explain the physiological symptoms. So, in my opinion, the best example you could give to explain why these are reductionist is the biological explanation. They don't account for the physiological symptoms of depression like lack of appetite, lack of sleep. Those are better explained by how serotonin is malfunctioning in the brain and causing all those changes in the body, because serotonin impacts the food centers of the brain and the this thing pineal gland and melatonin which is secreted. So that could be a better account of at least the physical aspect of depression. These explanations have just broken down depression into cognitive and behavioral symptoms, and they don't consider anything else. That's why they're reductionist. Alternatively, you can give any environmental explanation also. For instance, they talk about early experiences of life, how, in childhood, being trapped in some situation or being subject to abuse is resulting in depression in later life. But it could be that in adulthood itself, there is some problem in the environment which is resulting in depression. For example, childhood was fine for an individual, but once they became adults, they are facing severe stresses which they never faced before in their life. Unemployment, failing of relationships, say if it's a student not getting admission into their preferred university. So when they're exposed with very big challenges in present life, that might be that might be resulting in development of depression, not anything to do with childhood. So that part is ignored. So again, it becomes reductionist. Or you could also give psychic if you have learned about it, because as such it's not in the syllabus. Psychic explanation, I mean psychodynamic, Freud's explanation. He would attribute depression to the unconscious, suppression of negative emotions towards parents, or just suppression of impulses of the id in the unconscious might be resulting in depression. If you have learned something about transference, counter transference, you could give any things, any concepts of that nature. So again, because these explanations focus only on the conscious thoughts that people are consciously aware of, which might be emerging from beliefs that they are not fully aware of, but they are accessible in therapy. It does not really tap into the unconscious, how unconscious might be contributing to depression. So, for either of the reasons, they are reductionist. In my opinion, they are not holistic by any measure. So, I cannot give a counterpoint and say, however, they are also holistic. They are not. But I can give a counterpoint in the sense that if they would have taken a holistic approach, that is, if they combine with any of these other explanations, then they can provide a more holistic account for depression. The next issue which they have given in the syllabus is determinism versus free will, which we've already covered. The next one is experiments. Because Seligman's experiment is there in this topic, that's why this one has been given. When it comes to experiment, you can give both strengths and weaknesses. In terms of strengths, we know experiments are very valid. There's a lot of control and standardization. So if you take a study like Seligman, what you will see is They have used a highly standardized procedure. The questionnaires that participants had to answer, BDI, ASQ, and the sessions that they had to undergo for therapy, all were highly regulated. They were kept same across both the groups, the duration, timing of sessions, and all. So they're very reliable. Just make sure to link back to the larger topic. Here they're asking you about the explanations. They're not asking you about any particular study as such. So once you say that the study is very reliable, you could say it's valid because well established measures have been used of self report. Link it back and say that this gives credibility to the explanations. Like in this Seligman's case, it lends credibility to the learned helplessness explanation of depression. You have to explain it that way. You could also take weaknesses of experiments. The experiments that have been done in this area, they have been natural experiments. They've been only correlational, like evidence has emerged from them. They've not been able to establish cause-effect relationships. For example, Seligman's study is often criticized for like not being able to establish that pessimistic attribution style is the reason for depression. There is bidirectional ambiguity. It could be that people are first getting depressed, serotonin levels are going low, physiologically they're developing depression, and then because of that, their attribution style is becoming pessimistic. So the cause effect relationship might be reversed, which these experiments are not able to establish. What is the definite direction of the relationship? Again, to link back, you have to say that casts doubt on the validity of the learned helplessness explanation. Make sure to link back. In all the points that I'm talking about, I hope you are seeing for every point I have a because statement. This is reductionist because. Experiment use is a strength because. So I always have reasoning for whatever I'm saying, and I have context. If I say that an experiment is valid because they have used BDI and ASQ, that's the context. I'm not just saying in the air it is valid, I'm giving examples of what is valid. That is context. If I'm saying it is reductionist, I'm giving examples because they consider only thoughts and behaviors. They do not consider anything else besides that. So I don't leave it as, oh, it's a reductionist, oh, it's not valid. I always explain with reference to this particular theory what is reductionist about it or what is not valid about it. So your answers have to be in that format. Finally, one more issue that they've given, the last one, is reliability. Again, I think mainly this is because of Seligman's study. So if you take the point on reliability, you could talk about how the explanations might not be very reliable because of the underlying evidence. If we talk about a study like Seligman, that was a longitudinal study. I remember there was a lot of attrition in that. So then results end up not being reliable because why have people left the study? Is it because treatment wasn't working out for them? Is it the more pessimistic ones who have left the therapy? So then can we really say that pessimistic attribution styles contributes to depression and it can be reduced? That becomes questionable. Same way, if you've done any study like say Alloy et al. For Beck's depression theory, again very unreliable, same reasons, bidirectional ambiguity is there, or even that was longitudinal and many students were not available later for checking whether they've developed depression over the course of time or not. So I will strongly recommend, if you intend to take reliability, and it could come up as a named issue sometime, you learn some study for Beck also. If just generally you want to talk about why the theory might not be reliable, you can, instead of naming any specific study, say overall. Most of the studies done in the area tend to be natural experiments or correlational evidence. So strong experimental evidence cannot be established because manipulation is just unethical. I cannot purposely tell people, oh, you develop cognitive distortion, so purposely I make a child's childhood very adverse so that he develops distortions, and then I compare him with another child who does not have distortions. It's just impossible to do these type of studies. So it will remain unreliable. Because of that, we'll never be 100% sure whether the explanation is credible or not. If I think about in what sense it can be reliable in terms of strength, like if you want to give a counterpoint, Seligman's study is reliable to the extent that things were very standardized. It is quite overlapping with the previous issue experiment. So I would suggest that if you're taking this point, take only one, either take experiment or reliability. Don't take both, otherwise you end up giving the same things. So standardization is typically there, even for Beck's explanation. Any particular study, if you take alloy at all, or if you just say generally also, experiments that are done in the area always have specific questionnaires, like Beck depression inventory, which he himself has given. That makes it reliable because very standardized assessment is there. Or the repeated assessment that they do, like these are longitudinal studies, they fix durations, and then they, in a standardized way, like during same intervals, they keep on assessing participants. So definitely some amount of reliability is lent to the theories, but then like we saw, it's not fully reliable. When it comes to things like experiments reliability, try to give both sides, though not necessary, but why they have been good for the theory in terms of support, why they've not been able to support enough, that can make for a good balanced point. Okay, so that is what I have to cover for the May 2025 paper. And finally, what I would like you to tell you is to practice a lot. You have with every session three variants come up. One and three is mostly the same. So at least two variants you have to practice. Practice a lot. Practice in a way that I have guided you through to practice. So even when you are doing, follow the same approach like me. Read the questions carefully. See if you're now able to understand for how many marks, how much you need to write, how to take into account the key concepts. So I hope all those skills you're able to take away from this video. Still, if you have any doubts, questions about what I've explained in this video, or you want to give me suggestions to as to which videos to make further, you can definitely leave your suggestions in the comments box. My personal contact, which I have given, as I had explained in the introduction, that is only to schedule classes or for any correspondence work that you have with me. Anything related to this channel or this video, if you ask me personally, I will not respond. And if you keep on messaging me personally for these things, I might block you also. So please do not use that personal contact number for discussing things on this channel. You have a very good way of communicating with me for this channel, which is the comments box. There, I do read everyone's comments, I do reply. It can take me some time, but I do go through that. So definitely you'll get an answer if you post a question below. Okay, so that is it for this video. Definitely I'll come up with the video for another section of this paper only very soon. Keep practicing until then. Goodbye.